SalesClinic is a consortium of former vice presidents of sales on a national level, and what we focus on 100% is revenue generation for companies of all sizes. So we work with startups all the way up through Fortune 500, and in a startup scenario, we work with CEOs to get them ready to start generating revenue and work with them through that process. In the case of Fortune 500s or larger companies, mid-sized companies, we go in and find out why they're not growing, or if they are growing, why they're not growing fast enough, those kinds of things. And what we do is we look at the entire organization. So we don't just deal with sales. We also look at operations, marketing, finance, credit, all the different functional areas that might have a positive or negative effect on revenue generation. So if you think of SalesClinic, it's strictly revenue. That's all we do, which is why we're here today. So one interesting thing that I found when the meetup posting went up is someone, and I don't know if they're in the room or not, they posted that if you're going to think about revenue, don't think about revenue when your product is done. Think about it before the product is done. And I thought that that was a great comment on the posting, because the bottom line is that person's absolutely right. The problem is I don't run into that. What I run into is CEOs that have spent 100% of their time building a product, and then they wake up one day and say, I guess I better sell something. And that's the problem for a lot of the startups that we've had experience with. And it's also why we're mostly brought in. So there are 4 things I want you to take away from this discussion today. 1, don't believe your own bullshit. 2, set realistic expectations for yourself and the company. 3, you are your best sales rep. And I'm going to qualify that by saying, if you know how to sell. We'll get into that later. And revenue generation has 2 components, art and science. A lot of people know the art, but most startups do not pay attention to the science of revenue generation. So we're going to talk about that. So let's start with don't believe your own BS. Anybody know what happened on Martin Luther King Day, 1994 in LA? Wow, really?
What year?
1994, Martin Luther King Day, January 17th, 5:40 a.m.
Let me Google it real quick, hold on.
There was a major earthquake in Northridge, California. and I'm very disappointed you don't know that. Okay. So the reason I bring that up is because I know why that earthquake happened. It's because God was looking down on Northridge and saw me sleeping in my bed, contently, without a care in the world. And he said to himself, you know something, Ralph Edenzon's career path really sucks. So I think I'm going to shake things up a bit. And he did. And 20 seconds later, my house was uninhabitable. And I found out 9 hours later that the company I worked for was completely destroyed. So I was out of a house, and I was out of work, and I had 3 kids and a wife and plenty of bills. That was the day I became an entrepreneur. So I took this lovely business model that I was working with the destroyed company. I wrote a business plan. I went out, got a finder. He found me $1.2 million in seed capital based on the 20-page business plan. 1994, those were the days. 6 weeks later, I decided to go meet my investors. So I flew to New York with this wonderful PowerPoint, which was printed out, of course, because it was 1994, and it cost me $300 for the color printing. And I slid it across the table to my 4 investors. And before I could open my mouth, the lead investor says to me, listen, Rob, I understand you've had some success over the last 6 weeks. You got some contracts, you got distribution, terrific. I'd like you to celebrate your successes, that's terrific. But there's one piece of advice we absolutely want you to live and die by. Don't believe your own bullshit. Don't think you've got something. Because you don't. Until you generate revenue to the level where you can support yourself and you don't have to come back here and ask us for more money, you don't have anything. You've got to generate revenue. You've got to sell your product. And that has stuck with me since 1994. So when I go and talk to companies, especially companies like yours, it's all about how do you get to the point where you can be independent. How do you generate enough revenue so that if you want to raise money, it's because you want to raise money, not because you have to raise money. That's what revenue gives you. It gives you independence. So, when you think about how great your product is, and you think about how everybody's just going to buy it, don't believe the BS. Step away from it. Sit back in a room and say to yourself, let's assume for a second that they don't. Let's assume for a second that we have to push some jello uphill to get the revenue. So, largest piece of advice I ever got, I am imparting that onto you. Try to live by it because it's very important for your growth. Number 2, set your expectations properly. How many of you have written or created a spreadsheet with a 3-year revenue projection that you presented to some investor at some point in your life? Okay, so let me explain to you what you did, because I've done this too many times. Year 1, you're going to generate a little revenue. Year 2, you're going to generate maybe 3x what you did in year 1, and in year 3, you're going to have a $75 million company. Right? That's what you built. And you gave it to your investor, and your investor was either very sophisticated or what we used to call back in '96, dumb money. Right? And they looked at the spreadsheet depending on what their frame of mind was. Well, what some CEOs do is they then take this wonderful 3-year projection that has absolutely no basis in fact, and they make that their objectives for the company. There's a disconnect that you have to understand. Your 3-year projection is not your first year objectives. It can't be. Because chances are, when you wrote that 3-year plan, 6 months have elapsed since you got your money. Which means those numbers are old. And those numbers were probably based on a market that doesn't even exist today. So you need to sit down and rethink those expectations. The other thing is that revenue is a funny thing when it comes to CEO level objectives. You know, back in the day, when I started working at CitySearch in '96, all we cared about was eyeballs. I mean, that was the thing in the late '90s. Nobody cared about anything but eyeballs. I mean, hell, we lost hundreds of millions of dollars in investment capital before we made our first dollar in profit over there. And I was the sales director screaming for marketing support from my sales guys. And marketing looked at me and said, you're not going to bring me eyeballs. You're going to bring me revenue, but I don't care about revenue. I care about eyeballs. My VCs want eyeballs. So you have to think about what your objectives are based on what you're trying to accomplish. You may have an investor say to you, I need 30 companies that are generating any amount of money just to prove that someone will pay for your product. If you do that, I'll give you a $5 million investment. You may have a situation where an investor looks at you and says, you've got 10 customers, they're all paying you $50 a month. You get them up to $150 a month, you're good to go. Don't bother getting new customers, just work on your existing customers. These are the kinds of decisions you need to make based on the needs of the company. Once you establish your objectives, tell everyone, down to your marketing intern. There is not a single individual in your organization that shouldn't be intimately knowledgeable about what your company is trying to accomplish and how you're going to get there. It is absolutely critical because even the software engineers that are working on a particular item that you ask them to build, that thing they're building could be the deciding factor as to whether or not you get a deal 18 months down the line. So everything supports revenue. I was talking to a group of CEOs about 2 months ago. And at the end of the conversation, CEO walks up to me and says, you know, we've been in business for 3 years, got 11 million users. It's unbelievable. You know, I just never thought about revenue. You never thought about revenue? Really? I'm going to tell you another story about this guy because it was really interesting when he and I started talking about revenue. So the next thing, you are your best sales rep. And I told you I was going to qualify this if you know how to sell. Now, I sat down with the CEO to kick off a project with them. And they have an enterprise software solution. And I said, let's start off by defining what it is you're doing. And I went to the whiteboard and I put company name is, does, provides, blank. I said, Mr. CEO, would you kindly fill in the blank? And he said, I was hoping we'd work that out today. Really? I said, okay, let's step back a second. You raised $500,000 in investment capital 3 months ago. At some point in your life, you walked up to these investors and said, hey, I really want you to invest in my company. We do blank. What'd you say? He says, well, what we got investment capital for was a different business model and technology. It really doesn't apply to what we're doing today. And oh, by the way, Rob, can you go sell this? Yeah. So, we get put in positions where we've got CEOs that really just haven't thought it through, right? They just don't understand. They were so busy and so entrenched in what's being built, they didn't know if what's being built has a position in the market and can actually be sold. Another example as it relates to you as a CEO selling. There's this concept that I'm sure you've all heard of diarrhea of the mouth. So let me tell you a real life story. I sit down with a company in Santa Monica in one of those shared spaces. So we've got about the floor space of the table here, right? And there's 5 people. Well, there are 5 chairs. I'm the 5th person, right? So I've got a CEO of a startup. I've got a COO of a startup. I've got a sales rep that they've hired. And I have a woman sitting right here on my left that I really can't see because she's kind of behind me. And I said, what do you do? And she couldn't explain it. Problem number 1. Don't hire anybody that can't explain what they do. So I said, we were talking for a little while, and I said to the sales rep, I said, okay, look, let's just run a test here. I said, I'm your prospect, you're the sales rep. You called me. I say hello. Go. Okay? I'm going to tell you what happened in that conversation in just a second, but let me ask you to go back a little ways. Some of you not so far, but you remember last time you dated and you went out on a first date? Okay? Now, I don't remember this because it was 1992. But you go out on a first date, you're sitting across from the person, and they look at you and they say, tell me a little bit about yourself. Right? Well, my immediate response, of course, would be, hell, I was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey in 1957, and we lived in Edenzon, New Jersey, and New Brunswick is where I was born, but I lived in New Jersey with my brothers and my family, and then when I was in kindergarten, we moved to the town next door.
So bad.
But before we left kindergarten, I did the Nutcracker, and I was captain of the mice, and my buddy Jerry, he was King Rat. Okay? So I'm sure you're going to go date, go look at their sketches, you're going to do all kinds of things, right? This is what I had in front of me at that meeting. I said go. 45 seconds to a minute later, I said stop. I couldn't take it anymore. I looked at the sales rep and I said, look, I'm your prospect. I just checked my email, and now I'm watching puppies play with bears in Altadena on Facebook. I have no idea what you just said. I don't care about what you just said. And the CEO looked at me and said, and this is precious, he sure can talk, can't he? He sure can talk. We marvel at how much he can talk. And I looked at the CEO and I said, you know what? So do I. I marvel at how much he can talk. This is what I find with a lot of CEOs. One of the first things I do when I sit down with a CEO is I say to them, tell me what you do. 10 minutes later, I figure out, okay, I'm bored, and boy, can this guy use me. You've got to get your elevator speech down. Your elevator speech is going to lead you to a sales organization that talks intelligently to your prospects. Okay? You have, if no one's ever told you this, you have 8 seconds. That's it, people. You call somebody up and you want to talk to them about what you do, you have 8 seconds. That's 25 words or less. Okay? You have to make a statement of what you do, and you have to make a statement of why they should talk to you. In 25 words or less, in 8 seconds. So, as the CEO, you are your best sales rep. Bringing somebody in from the outside is not going to cut it. Because you're the one that came up with this idea, you're the one that built it, you're the one that's passionate about it, and you're the one that found the problem that it solves. But if you can't talk, you've got a problem. So you've got to spend the time to develop what it is you're going to say before you start talking to someone. And by the way, I know that most of you have probably gone into a pitch session with investors. In sales or revenue generation, the pitch is obsolete. It's critical that you understand that. Don't think that you're going to sell your product using a buffet. It's a sit-down dinner. You can't just put out what it is you do and expect that people are going to walk up to the table and take what they want. You have to go and talk to these people. It is a discussion. And a lot of the people that I talk to will say to me, I need you to build my pitch. No, there is no pitch in sales. There is a question and answer process that guides the prospect down a road that results in a sale. That is how you sell in 2014. It is not IBM 1981 any longer. You've got to have a conversation. Save your pitch for the investors who give you 30 seconds and don't allow you to ask them questions, right? They ask you, you don't ask them. In sales, you're the person in control of the conversation. And how do you take and keep control of a conversation? You ask questions. I live and die by the phrase, the person who asks the most questions wins. And I learned that in interviews for sales jobs. Every time the person interviewing me would ask me a question like, how much do you want to make next year? I would immediately go back and say, how much is the position budgeted for? I don't want to tell them how much, right? The same thing is true in sales. What are you doing today? How are you solving the problem? What problems do you have? And also, of course, the qualification of people you're talking to. Is this person worthy of my time? Which is another thing the CEOs have a problem with. They will talk to everybody because they're so passionate about their product. Pick your conversations carefully. Your time is as valuable as theirs is. Okay. Oh, one suggestion if you haven't done this yet. If you plan on selling, if you plan on going out and actually trying to generate revenue on your own, buy a book called Spin Selling. Spin Selling will teach you how to stop talking about yourself and find out what the challenges are of the person you're talking to. It's all caps, S-P-I-N. So, if you're going to build a if you're going to build a selling process or a sales process for your product, the very first thing you need to understand is the buying process. This is where a lot of people fall down. They build a sales process based on how they want to sell, but they don't understand how the prospect is going to buy. True story. Enterprise application development system for mobile applications, providing access to the enterprise apps on a mobile device. How do you think a CIO is going to buy that product? They're going to analyze the world. They're going to talk to their peers. They're going to bring it in and test it. They're going to do all kinds of things. Well, at one point, about a year or two ago, all the analysts said, you know what? Application development for mobile devices is going to go into a tornado market. So, the CEO I was working with said, we're in a tornado. We're going to re-engineer the product. It's going to be self-service, and there's going to be no phone support. So these people in IT organizations at Fortune 2000 companies are going to have the ability to sign up for free and just go do their thing. That's great. There is not a IT department in the Fortune 2000 anywhere that would ever think about buying a product like that in a self-service scenario. Okay? So this is a combination of two things. One, not understanding the buying process, and two, boy, did this guy believe his own bullshit. Okay? If you read something from an analyst that says you should be selling a certain way, keep reading. Chances are there are other opinions out there. Now, the preferred buying method. How do people buy your product? Is it an e-commerce play? Is it a direct sales play? Do you need partners and have to sell it through a channel? Are system integrators required in order for your product to work? Not work as you defined it, but work for the prospect, right? Salesforce.com, perfect case in point. They grew like a weed, right? Freemium model, sign up. The application, it was great when it first came out. You put your information in, you got all kinds of information back. I mean, standard CRM product, right? But what they realized was people were getting into the free product and not buying. And the people that bought didn't use it. So they realized at some point that they needed an entire army of customer success managers that did nothing but make sure that somebody who bought the product, 5 users up to 5 million users, didn't matter, they used the product. That customer success manager was only responsible for retention. You have to look at your prospect and understand them very, very well in order to make sure that your company is on a trajectory to not only get revenue, but also keep the revenue. In an e-commerce scenario, ask yourself how those e-commerce people are going to be upsold. Don't just consider the sale. Consider the upsell. So you can sell them something for $10 a month, but what if you really want them at $50? How are you going to get that customer from $10 to $50 a month? Does that mean that somebody's got to call them? Does that mean you're going to go into a marketing campaign and try and upsell them? These are the things to consider. A lot of startups start selling without thinking things through from a strategy perspective. When you are going to start a company, or even if you've got an existing sales organization, you have to start with your sales strategy. Your sales strategy leads you to a sales plan. Your sales plan leads you to a sales process. And the sales process then needs to be applied to a CRM system. Startups love spreadsheets. And you've got to get away from that. Because a spreadsheet will never tell you who to call. A spreadsheet will never remind you that somebody said, call me back in January. A CRM system is critical. Even if you just go get a freebie off the internet, it doesn't matter what it is. I have a client right now. I started the engagement. I said, guys, I need a list of your clients for the last 2 years and the referral partner that got you that client. 10 weeks later, I didn't have my information. It's just a foreign concept to me. The fact that you can't push 3 buttons and get what you need, it's just a foreign concept to me. So when you talk about your sales strategy and then your sales process, the sales process has got to be at a level where each step progresses you towards a sale. Okay? There's a concept in the market called continuation versus progression. Okay? Continuation means I'm still talking to you. Progression means it's actually moving forward. When you think about the partnerships you're putting in place, you think about the processes you've got going right now, think about where are you on that spectrum. Are you just continuing? Or are you actually progressing these individuals towards a close, which will obviously then lead to revenue generation? These are the kinds of things that a lot of CEOs don't think about because they're not trained in revenue generation. So you have to think about this kind of stuff. The other thing is features and benefits. Can someone tell me the difference between a feature and a benefit? Somebody who's not in sales, by the way? Who can tell me the difference between a feature and a benefit?
A feature is a function that you have. A benefit is actually what the customer can use.
Yes. Yes. If you are not saying the word you or your when you talk to people, you're making a mistake. Okay? This iPad can give me my email. What it does for me, or what it does for you, is it provides me with the ability to get the information that I need on a regular basis. You should never say a feature of your product or service unless there's a comma and a benefit statement. It's critical. We used to call it a data dump. It used to be we put a sales engineer in front of a group of people, and that sales engineer would just regurgitate everything they learned about the product over the prior 6 months. And the prospect would be sitting there with their head spinning, not understanding what the heck it's going to do for them. Don't get into the habit of doing data dumps. Make sure that you understand what your prospect needs and apply what you're offering to what they need so that they can internalize why they need your product. Qualifying questions. You should generate 3 to 4, maybe 5 qualifying questions that you want answered in a particular way before you agree in your own mind to continue talking to that person. Okay? And one of them is, do you have budget? These questions are critical. You will waste more time with people who will never buy your product than you ever wanted to if you don't have set qualifying questions. And I'm going to go back to what I said before. Please consider that your time as a salesperson is equally as important as your prospects. Don't think their time is more important than yours. And therefore, you should only deal with people that make sense for you. Be selfish. It's okay. You don't have to talk to everyone. You know, I used to talk to some of my sales reps who worked for me who would tell me that they had a deal on the table. I'd say, that's great. Tell me about it. And at the end of the conversation, I would look at them and I'd say, listen, don't think because you walked into a bar and the woman winked at you that you're getting married. Okay? That's not the way it works. So you have to make sure that there is some science behind what you're doing so that you can look at something objectively and say, oh, okay, now I understand. Yeah, we might actually get married. Sales execution. A lot of CEOs at startups hire a VP of sales. Now, I am a former VP of sales for many startups. Don't fall into that trap. You don't need me. What you need is someone who's going to sell. Okay? You get somebody who's been a VP of sales for 10 years at a company, and chances are they're not cold calling. They are not going on a road to have an initial conversation with someone. These people have an attitude that they manage salespeople. I went on an interview for a VP of sales job that was on Career Builder, God, I don't know, 2001. Sat down with the CEO. 20 minutes later, he says, you're perfect. I want to offer you the job. It's great. I said, great. Give me a little more detail on what the job is. He said, well, you're going to come in, you're going to start generating revenue, and as soon as you generate revenue that justifies another sales rep, you'll bring in a sales rep and you'll start building out your organization. Really? Okay. How long does it take to sell this product? Oh, well, we don't know that yet. Oh, okay. What's your average revenue per customer? We don't know that yet. Okay. So if I need $150,000 to hire a sales rep, how long is it going to take me to get there? We don't know that yet. Okay. What's your budget for this position? Because we're going to pay you $60,000 base salary and we're going to give you 5% commission on anything you sell. Great. Okay. I just walked out of a job at 125. So thanks for the 60. And 5% of a product that you don't know can sell in some unknown time period at some unknown revenue level doesn't really help me. Right? But this CEO was convinced that he needed a $60,000 a year VP of sales. Well, God bless you, man. Good luck, right? I cut a contract with him for 10 hours a week for $5,000 a month. And I said, I'll sell for you for 10 hours a week. We'll do it for 3 months. If I sell something, we'll have a party. If I don't sell something, we'll shake hands and I'll go away. Don't hire a VP of sales. Hire somebody who's going to be hungry and who can sell your product. And that's probably going to cost you low side, $35,000 base salary, high side, 60 to 70. And you'll give them a nice commission plan, and they'll be real happy. And then when you get to the revenue level that you need and the investment capital you need, go find your VP of sales who you're willing to live and die with as a member of your executive committee. Not just the sales rep. Last point, and we'll take some questions here. Air cover. Marketing air cover. A lot of CEOs believe that if you put a salesperson in place, they're going to sell something. It's going to be brute force. They're going to make cold calls, people are going to answer the phone, they're going to want to have conversations, and they're going to sell something. Not going to happen. I'm in a project right now where we've probably made 5,000 phone calls already. We have 2 appointments for demos. Okay? 5,000 with 2 demos. I said to the CEO, this will fail. Okay? Did you want to pay me to do this? I just don't have it in me to not take your money. You are convinced. If you are convinced that I will be successful, and I am convinced I won't, and we still want to do this, God bless it, let's go. Okay? So we win. And sure enough, I get to go back to the CEO now and say, I don't want to say I told you so, but kind of told you so, right? How about the $50,000 to $100,000 worth of marketing budget so that if somebody actually makes a phone call to somebody, they know the name of the company? It's funny because I've had experiences where a CEO wanted to hire a former IBMer. And I looked at him and I said, does this person understand that when they walk into a company with your company name and show their business card, that it doesn't say IBM? I mean, do they get that? Because if they don't get that, you may want to educate them before they take the position. You know, walking in and saying, hi, I'm from Zaza.com. Really? They're not going to pay much attention, especially with an IBMer that knows that it doesn't matter who they talk to. If they show that business card, they're getting in. Right? So, these are the kinds of things, and I hope that I've answered some of your questions, or maybe what I've just done is generated a whole ton of questions. I don't know. But these are the kinds of things I would ask you to consider and sit down in a room and really think through. Questions?
Hi, my name is Eric. I'm a mobile app developer. I have hired salespeople, and the first thing they show is me. They show me on what they can do, and then but they just couldn't perform. And how to hire a good sales? What's the best practice for interview process?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't hire anybody at a startup who hasn't had that startup experience. That's the first thing. They have to understand how the company moves and jives. Okay. The other thing is you need a track record at a startup, not a track record at SAP or a track record at Oracle. You need a track record at a company that nobody knows of and probably still has never heard of. If they were able to sell that, then they will probably be able to sell your product. The other thing is make sure that they understand the difference between art and science when it comes to selling. Just because they can talk, and just because they can sell you, doesn't mean that they're any good. What they need to do is they need to ask you questions. If they're not asking you more questions than you're asking them, then chances are their style of selling is to simply deliver the message and hope the sale comes. So look for the rep that asks you a ton of questions about your value proposition, your marketing, all of the different things that would surround sales. Because if they know that, then you probably have a winner there.
Yeah, I'm Pat. Thanks very much. Very informative. Your presentation was quite CEO-centric. Can you comment on flatter organizations where there might be 5 co-equal partners, for instance, how that affects the revenue stream and the strategies?
Well, that depends on what the role of the partners are. If all 4 or 5 partners are managing partners versus revenue generators, then you've got to identify one individual that's going to run with this, okay? And you don't have to call them a VP of sales, but the bottom line is there's got to be a chief revenue officer, somebody that owns that, okay? You can't spread this amongst people, okay? If the partners are responsible for generating revenue, and not just, and also delivering whatever it is they're selling, then you have to have individual salespeople. Each partner needs to be a trained salesperson. And that's kind of tough, because what ends up happening is you have 4 partners and 3 are selling and 1 isn't. But that partner is critical to the organization. Now what do you do? Right? So you gotta really balance who these people are, what their experience is, and how you want to generate the revenue. It's a tough thing to deal with, but one person has to be responsible for revenue. Yeah?
You were mentioning about questions that you kind of ask to qualify sales before, like, do they have budget? Can you go into maybe a couple other questions that kind of help you, so yeah, you don't waste your time?
Well, if you read Spin Selling, you'll see that there's 4 different types of questions. The first type of question is called a situation question. A situation question simply gives you the understanding of what's going on at the company. Okay? The P in Spin stands for problem. It's a problem question. So your qualifying questions are really in the situational side of things. The problem questions will identify if the person you're talking to has a need for your product, okay? So situational questions, and some of these questions, by the way, can be answered through the web, you know, even before you start talking to somebody, right? So let's say you're selling, well, let's go back to the application development tool for mobile devices, okay? If I'm selling a company on that, the first thing I want to know is how many devices do you have? What are the devices? Right? I want to know what they're being used for currently, and the assumption would be email, calendar, and contacts, right? I want to know if there is an actual strategy for mobile applications within the corporation. These are the kinds of questions that I would ask that will give me an idea as to whether or not these people are ready to talk to me. Now, if the answers to those questions are correct, based on my criteria, now I can start talking to them about, okay, so your people, tell me about the functional areas and what kind of functionality these people need that resides in your enterprise. Now I'm identifying a problem. It's no longer a situational scenario. Okay? So that's how it goes.
I have a question. So it seems like in a lot of cases with startups, you're not selling into an existing category, but you're actually shaping, latent demand. You're creating a new category of service. Can you talk a little bit about how the sales process is different there?
You know, first of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's what most of the challenges are. You're either presenting something new or something that is a different way of doing what they're already doing. Hopefully, you're lucky enough to be changing what they're already doing, because that's a little bit easier. You know, a lot of people talk about the difference between selling and educating. And if you're a salesperson that has to educate, you've got an uphill battle. You have to depend on your marketing department to really sort of set the seed, you know, put the seed out there so that when the sales rep calls, they're not talking Greek. And that's what a lot of sales reps end up doing, because the company recognizes that the solution is the right solution based on what's available in the market today. But the problem is, it's such a dramatic change from the way of thinking of the people you're talking to that you really need to massage it. And the only way to massage it is through education, and the only way to do education is through marketing. Because if you expect your sales reps to educate all these prospects, you better build an army. Because you're going to need thousands of people out there trying to educate. Verizon is a really good example of this, by the way. So I hope you're familiar with machine-to-machine data plans. Are you familiar with that? So machine to machine means that an inanimate object is talking to another inanimate object over the wireless network. So think about an intelligent electric meter on your house that automatically reports back to the electric company over the wireless network. That's machine to machine. Verizon sales reps know how to sell iPhones. They know how to sell data plans. They know how to sell, well, they used to know how to sell BlackBerries, right? And suddenly they've been thrown into this thing that says, hey, you know what you need to go sell? You need to go sell this device that used to require some human being to go over there and take a look at it, but now it talks wirelessly back to the central location. So you need to go sell that Go. Well, half the universe doesn't know what machine to machine is. You try and go talk to Dow Chemical about machine to machine, and there's probably 3 people in the whole company that know what you're talking about. So the question is, how does Verizon get the message out to their target audience that machine to machine, and by the way, the analysts say, if you believe them, that there are going to be 5 billion machine to machine devices in the market in the next 5 years. So this is a hockey stick situation, right? Corporate America may or may not know about it. GE knows about it. They just came out with an announcement. But most companies don't. So the education process that has to happen has got to be at the marketing level. Yeah.
Hi there, John Schreiber. I'm a CEO. I have 1 employee. He's bringing in revenue.
Congratulations, by the way.
I became CEO the day he started making revenue.
Exactly.
My observation of what you said sounds like journalism 101. You go in to talk to somebody, and it's who, what, when, where, and why.
Yep.
Who are you trying to reach, internal, external? What are you trying to solve? When are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? And why do you think what I'm selling you can work for you?
That's right.
Okay? You go in there and you do that. But should you not do some homework before you go see this person? Should you not kind of have an idea of what all those answers are going to be?
Well, you know what they say about lawyers, right? A lawyer won't ask a question they don't know the answer to, right? A sales rep should be pretty close to that kind of philosophy, okay? And now, unlike years ago when I started selling, now you can actually do that. You can find out who the people are. You can find out what their attitudes are. You can understand their product line. You can find out all kinds of stuff on the web that historically you couldn't find out. And that's absolutely correct. I remember my brother, who runs Special Olympics in New Jersey, telling me that he used to get interns in that wanted to work for Special Olympics. And one of the first questions he would say is, tell me what you know about Special Olympics. And interviews would end 30 seconds later if the answer to that question was not correct. Okay? This is the same thing with sales. The point is very well taken. The more you know before you start talking to someone at a company, the better off you are. And between LinkedIn and sometimes Facebook and just the general website that the companies have put up, you can find out a ton of information before you even open the conversation. So that's a good point.
Cool, thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you, I appreciate it.